Welcome to Speak Easy Doctors, where we talk about life and how to navigate it with a little more communication. I'm Dr. J.
And I'm Dr. D. We're two BFFs with PhDs in communication, but most importantly, we're human beings figuring things out just like you.
From everyday conversations to life's bigger moments, we're here to explore how words shape our views, experiences, and relationships.
No scripts, no lectures, just honest conversations about life and speaking easier.
So, let's dive in. This is Speak Easy Doctors.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing shared here is intended as medical or mental health advice. One of the hosts is a licensed counselor, but the conversation should not replace professional care or therapy. Please consult a qualified healthcare provider for any personal concerns. Both hosts are PhDs in communication, and our goal in this podcast is to inform and inspire, not to diagnose or treat.
Oh, why hello there, Dr. D.
Well, hello, Dr. J. Welcome to another episode of Speak Easy Doctors.
Yes.
How are you feeling about everything?
Feeling good. I think the past few episodes have gone really well, and I'm just very thankful for the support and the feedback we've received.
Same here.
And I didn't think anyone would want to listen to me. You, of course, but...
Well, thank you, dear listeners. I know right now it's mostly our family and friends.
There's nothing wrong with that, though.
But please do share. We promise to try to make it interesting and to really be authentic and give you our pure perspectives. So please continue to share this podcast with anybody you know who might be interested. This is more to me than just communication and advocating for it. I think it's a way to support communication as something that could be also a self-help modality. What do you think about that, James?
Absolutely. Once you start exploring topics, I think that allows for growth. And I think the most dangerous thing you can do is just shut off communication. I think we're starting to see what happens when you do that on a global scale. Obviously, wars and things like that happen, but once you stifle that, it leads to some dark and dangerous places.
And it's really sad when we do start to cut off communication. We start to cut off connection too, right?
Not just connection from others, but from ourselves as well.
Exactly. And we start to kind of fall into an interior world that might not necessarily represent reality.
Yeah, it's so strange the way you frame reality with words, especially.
Right. And framing reality is sort of the topic of this podcast today.
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. I picked a theory that I was interested about. It's called the coordinated management of meaning. It's actually a communication theory. It was first developed in the 1970s by, I believe it was W. Barnett Pierce and Vernon Cronin. They were two communication scholars who wanted to understand why miscommunication happens, despite speaking the same language. But what communication, this CMM is what I'm going to call it, has become is that it helps explain how people create meaning together in conversations. So it really suggests communication is more than just exchanging information, me telling you what I'm thinking and you telling me your perspective. It's way more than that. It's actually a way of co-constructing our reality. Every conversation shapes our relationships, communities, our culture, and even our rules, the rules that we set for how we live every day.
Right. And just to piggyback off that, Bakhtin was another theorist, a linguist who discussed the dialogical self. Anytime we think about ourselves and anytime we think, actually, we're hearing other voices. Not in a literal sense, but in a metaphorical sense. And that is based on social rules or cultural backgrounds, or it lets you know how to behave or how not to behave or what to do. And it's also a lot of times subjective on how you perceive those other voices, what those voices tell you. How are you taking in those voices? As something positive, something negative. And this is especially important during the formative years, childhood. So, yeah.
I kind of perceive those voices when I think about those voices that you're talking about. I think about them as echoes of interactions, echoes of maybe events in our life when we're talking to our parents and they're reprimanding us and telling us what we're supposed to do and not do, or echoes of our best friends saying, yeah, you should go out there and being supportive. But these multitude of voices shape our inner self. But then it also is shaped by the reality that we have co constructed. So I think those are two very good complementary theories that look at how we perceive the world and how we as a collective shape the world.
Right. And it's just amazing how powerful they can be at either destroying you or lifting you up.
Yeah. Speak more to that.
Well, I think, growing up, I think especially as a child, you internalize a lot. At least I did. Negative things that were said. And I forget what Dr. Phil says. For every attaboy, what is it? For every negative thing you say to your child, one thing, you need 1,000 that-a-boy to balance them out. Because the negative or something I think we're just designed to do that. We're just designed to internalize negative things. So yeah, I heard some negative things growing up, and you start to internalize that you're the problem. And um, why would you do that? What's wrong with you? I heard that a lot. What's the matter with you? And apparently there's quite a bit the matter with me, or what's wrong with you? Things like that. And little things like that can really impact the way you see yourself. And anytime you're put into a context, that language comes out and you have a tendency to blame yourself for things that you have absolutely no control over. You have to kind of, I think, develops this magical thinking that you did something wrong, even though you had zero control over it. I don't know if I can think of a
Yeah.
specific example, but one time my brother pushed me through a window, and my mom blamed me for that. How could you allow that to happen? You should have known better. And that voice is with me now. If something bad happens, if there's an accident, do you know why COVID happened? My fault.
Why?
This is my fault. God is
You're
punishing
patient.
everyone.
Wait, are you patient zero? What happened?
No, metaphorically, God was punishing me, so he wanted to punish the world. So that's why
Wow.
COVID happened. I know
It
you hear a lot
sounds
of
so hard.
conspiracy
It
theories,
sounds
but
so difficult. It sounds so difficult to be you right now.
that's my fault. God was punishing me. I kissed a girl when I was 17. That's why he's before marriage. Yeah, bad stuff.
Well, going back around to that whole needing 1,000 attaboys or attagirls to, I guess, remove all the negative aspects of the perspectives and negative perspectives we have of ourselves. Um, I think that there is I guess you could say, association with that, or a neurobiological way that our bodies are really wired for the negative. So it's about being able to recognize some of these negative things that are even negative statements, negative conversations, negative interactions. Recognizing all of those and really internalizing that, and somehow our neurobiology is able to wire that and say that's a threat. So it makes a lot of sense that one negative interaction requires 1,000 good jobs, right?
Right. Again, like you said, it makes sense. You're trying to protect yourself. It's for the sake of safety that you perceive everything as a threat. And when it gets to that point, then that's how you feel comfortable because you just isolate yourself from everything. Or you're the first to tear yourself down. And then so someone else can't do it. So you have more control in that sense by the words you use.
What's making me really give pause is that in the current landscape of here we are in America, there's, like you said, there's a lot less connection. There's more divisive conversations. And now we've co constructed a reality that's incredibly polarized to some degree, much more polarized than what I remember growing up. So we also have kids growing up under these conditions. How
Right.
do you think we co constructed this?
I think it's much easier now it's more legible if you vilify someone for what they believe or how they look or what they wear. Whereas before, there wasn't that much media out there. You actually had to go talk to someone or live an experience before you developed a stereotype. But now it's readily available online through social media. You see a few stereotypes and easily developed, easily digestible.
So I think it looks like you have all of these communication deliverables that take flight. They
Right.
they could be a snapshot on social media, a meme, for example, and it represents some idea that maybe the original creator didn't even intend, and then it becomes shared and becomes this whole other meaning, like we're creating meaning here. And then it could become divisive quite quickly because of that type of communication deliverable. Um, uh, Social media being one of them, the news being another. So we are co-constructing a reality now where the original intention of that communication is no longer going to be perceived as the original intention. It can become whatever we create at that point.
Right. And that's just like anything. Anytime an artist puts something out there, whether it's music or a book or television, they really have no idea what the response is going to be. And people can turn it into whatever it is they want. And I think sometimes that's true with language. If someone tells you something, for me personally, people have told me things that I'm sure they're unaware of 30, 40 years later, the kind of impact it had on me. Because I took that based on how I perceive words or how I perceive contexts. And those have stuck with me. And it's only now that I'm starting to understand the power those words have, either to build you up or tear you down.
I feel so unsafe talking about this, like how it is in the current world. Like you talk about how it is with art, and that's pretty scary to be an artist to let themselves out there, be vulnerable, show who you are and express who you are in these abstract ways, maybe through music, maybe through a painting. But now you're telling me that this is happening in regular everyday communication, that what we intend takes flight and becomes reinterpreted as something different so often, and especially if we put it on social media, that is forever.
And I think that is based upon the multiple voices we've heard in the past, what is good, what is bad. And we're all raised differently, but we all seem to converge around certain things, that there is something evil, there is something good. What that is going to look different, but I think those are two pillars that have remain pretty constant. And that's why all the narratives, the stories we love are about good versus evil.
And I really don't want to make this a political
No, neither do I.
conversation. What I want to say is that no matter the information that we're given, I feel like we need to stop taking the literal sometimes and going back to what's the intention. Because it's almost like when we have arguments with our significant others, right? We have to volley back and forth to better understand what the other person means when we're having an argument. I don't know how many times 100% of us will have miscommunication. 100%. We will, at some point in our lives, not be able to communicate to someone effectively. And we may even communicate the opposite of our intention. And it's not even our intention to do so.
Right.
So what I'm saying is when we have these interactions, we should start asking for clarifications. If we don't go to the first, and this is just an opinion, obviously, don't go to the first perspective that pops in your mind to better understand that person. Don't go to the first judgment. Allow yourself to go, this is how I am perceiving it. So let me clarify what it is that they're actually meaning by what they're saying.
Right. Maybe we can start the conversation like with a lot of things we've done, going back to childhood. I mean, do you have a memory of interacting with people and using the rules you were given in your household, either thinking about those when you were interacting with people or applying them, either whether that could be language or behavior, context, anything like that? Do you have any memories?
I have a million memories.
What's maybe the first memory you have where you say, okay, I'm interacting with this
I'm not
person's.
very, I mean, I think you've noticed I'm not very good at first memories because I don't know if it's early. I don't know. I can talk about what pops up in my head, and it's not an early memory. It's a memory of my family in general. So it's a compilation. We could say it's a compilation of voices, actually, now that we're going back to your theory. It's a compilation of how my family has structured what it means to be a child. So they're very strict overall in general. I had a very strict family. I couldn't have a boyfriend until I was in my 20s probably. So I
But you
really
did have
did
a
rebel.
boyfriend before that.
Yes, of course. But it's not very reasonable not to have a boyfriend when you're younger than your 20s, but you couldn't talk back to the elder and the elders are always correct. Everything they say is true about reality, about life. And there was always a mismatch, I think, between those rules, which were agreed upon by the adults and caregivers in my life. Those rules took precedence over my questioning. And that questioning inside of me, it's like an internal voice. And this is where I wonder, where did that come from? The nature versus nurture. Are you born this way? Are you born a rebel? Are you born with a certain personality traits that could actually take that coordinated management of meaning and how we co-construct reality and can take that reality that was given to you and question it a lot more than you would typically, than someone who is more welcoming to other people's opinions. So I think there was always something inside of me that rebelled and wondered and questioned. So just to kind of summarize, I had family that constructed that reality, that strict discipline, and that my voice shouldn't be the one that is, I guess, a priority over the elders, right? And then there was something inside of me, an inner voice that said, that's not correct.
Right. And just speaking to that as well, I had a very similar upbringing. The elders, the adults are always right. I had a very similar experience, but I think the way I dealt with it, the way I framed it was by wanting to be safe. And what that meant was never speaking up. And even if you thought something, you would never say anything. You wouldn't behave in a certain way or use any words that were hurtful. There was just a lot of agreement, a lot of yes and okay. And if
Yeah.
I if there was any anger or being upset, that was always shown in private, away from anyone. So you never showed it. You weren't allowed to be upset.
So what were the rules that you think that they were creating in your life?
It was the rule, the way I internalized it, which I don't know if it's accurate or not, is that other people are more important. So you need to be cautious about what you say around people and not to upset them. So the words you use should always be carefully plotted out. Don't show any anger. Don't get upset with people.
Yeah.
I think there was that.
So it brings me back to the idea that rules that we have in our life, the way that we're supposed to interact, they're socially learned.
Right.
It's the idea that our interactions actually create these standards by which we perceive and live. So it brings me back to CMM and how it might relate to rulemaking. So Pierce and Cronin, they described two kinds of rules in their theory. One was constitutive rules, which tells us what something means. In our interactions, these rules could be like when the elders tell you something and say, this is what that means. When you're young, you're supposed to basically sit down and not speak. So that's a constitutive rule. Regulative rules tell us what to do next. For example, once you say hello to an elder person and you always say hello to the eldest first, then you're supposed to sit down. So that there's this interplay between the constitutive rules and the regulative rules. Now, if we break that down and we say that's socially learned, and now as adults, how do you see that coming into our reality as adults?
I think it's so strange because not everyone, I mean, we have social norms, but not everyone there's other norms that people have. So some people think it's rude to do this. Some people think, no, it's very polite to do that. And that could be something as simple as looking someone in the eye when you're talking to them or interrupting conversation, all of these different things. And it wasn't until I think I got in high school that I started to see, oh, not everyone has this universal experience. People have different norms. People have different ways of speaking and things that they see as polite or as impolite. And I always felt very horrible every time I broke a norm, whatever it might be. It's impolite to do this, or I can't think of an example off the top of my head. I apologize, but you get the idea.
Well, I think about social norms, aka rules, right? These rules that we placed in society. And the fact of the matter is that these social norms are constructed, co-constructed. And my issue typically with people is when they become so rigid that these social rules must be applied 100%. But I'm just going to give the example of yelling. When you think about yelling, when you hear somebody yelling, what are you thinking?
Internally, I'm thinking I did something wrong. And
Mhm.
now there's a want to, what is it? Freeze, fawn, fight or flight.
Mhm.
There's
Fight
a
or
want
flight,
to,
yeah.
there's a want to fawn and say, okay, I'll do whatever it takes to make the situation acceptable to you. There's that immediate
But
reaction.
like, it is true also that, for example, I think there are some Middle Eastern cultures where yelling that we hear as an American is completely normal to them as regular spoken material. It's not anger, you know? I think about New Yorkers, that bluntness, and that gets misinterpreted most of the time by people in the South. So it's just to me something that I want the audience to think about is that when we have these rules and they are so rigid, we don't allow people to be themselves. It's almost like, are we putting pressure on people and what they grew up with and the voices and the places that they've been, the construction of their reality, we're putting pressure on them to be different people. And I take issue with that. And I'm hoping that people understand that, yeah, these roles that we've created in society, we're co creating them. So we can choose, do we want to create a space and an environment for empathy, or do we want this rigid rulemaking that can often permeate our society?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you were speaking about yelling. When I first met Shannon's family, they yelled a lot at each other, and I always assumed there was anger behind it, and they would reference one another as bitches and other kinds of names of that nature. And I always thought that was interesting, and I always thought they hated each other. But no, they're very loving with one another. And it took me a while to understand that. And about Shannon, about her communication style, if she raises her voice, it's not always out of anger. It's passion. So yeah, because in my family, if someone raised their voice, there was anger. That was definitely anger.
I think it's really interesting because if we were to talk about my family, even though I grew up with so much strict discipline from the older, my aunts, my uncles, my mom, my dad, there is something that was interesting in the next generation. For example, my sister and brother and I, we are blunt. We tell each other exactly how we feel. Sometimes it's mean, sometimes there's yelling. We love each other with all our hearts, but it's definitely a very uncomfortable thing. And then when I look at my husband's family, there's not conflict discussed there. And that lack of conflict, actually, how that was modeled for my husband and how he reacted to it. He's a lot more quiet and more of a marinator and does not typically like to be blunt or to speak to his feelings. So here I am. I come to him with a different conflict style because my rules and how my family, my generation has come to, I guess you could say we broke our rules. We broke the adult rules. We couldn't handle it, or we learned new rules from American society and learning how to speak up. And his rules that he grew up with, how he was modeled to not speak to a particular thing because it might hurt someone's feelings. That kind of rule making and social norm was at odds when we came together. And so we've had to create now, and this is like is brings me back to the co-creation of meaning. We create a very different dynamic from both of our families. It's like two opposites, two extremes coming together, and we found our middle ground, which is a lot more like giving each other space. Like I give him space to marinate, and then he also gives me space to speak.
Right. And it's funny. I think you and Kenneth are exactly the same as me and Shannon. I grew up in a household you don't talk about conflict, and there's so many things unresolved in my family that I wish we could talk about. And it's only recently that I'm starting to talk more with Shannon or starting to talk more with my mom. And I wish things would always have been that way. I wish I would have been given an outlet to talk about, not only to talk about things, but normalize that it's okay to talk about your feelings, because that certainly wasn't allowed, and sounds very similar to your upbringing as well. You're not allowed to voice certain emotions, certain feelings, or anything that might be at odds with the family and the family's ideologies.
Yeah. And so there is that negotiation, right? I think about it, it's like how we negotiated our own it's really our Filipino heritage of respecting your elders that was juxtaposed with American culture and speaking your mind and individuality. So, collectivist culture versus an individualistic culture, clashing heads. And us growing up in that and trying to maneuver through. So what comes up is this beautiful meld of both where I still respect my elders to some degree. And yeah, there's a caveat, right? but also I value my opinions and I don't want to hold back. And that's the same in our relationships. We have two conflict styles built by this different co-creation of meaning for our respective families, and we come together and we create a new constitutive rule, and then we negotiate new regulative rules. So we have new meaning and we have now new types of ways to interact. So my husband and I, we have agreed that when he needs to marinate, he gets 5 hours, not 2 weeks. And he has agreed to allow me to speak until I have exhausted myself sometimes. And that is the beauty of constitutive rules, new meaning, and
Right.
regulative rules. This is how we're going to work through it.
Right. I think that's so interesting too, because my wife and I are very similar. And anytime there was an argument, my go-to would be to take a walk, and I would not take my cell phone. And the compromise is now I have to take my cell phone when I walk, and I guess that's okay. There was a want to just distance myself from everything and isolate from everyone. That can get kind of dangerous, obviously, if you're just ruminating with the thoughts in your head and thinking about what a horrible person you are. So yeah, I guess it's good to take the phone when I take a walk. She's worried something's going to happen to me. I don't know.
That's fair. I think that's a fair negotiation.
Guess so. What's going to happen?
I don't know. You might bump into a wall. I don't know. I mean, anything could
Might
happen to you.
slip on a banana peel or something. I don't know.
I mean, you do throw them around like you don't care. So
That is true. Are you hearing any voices right now while conversing
I
with me?
did.
What do you mean?
Like I heard some voices behind you. Or are you talking about, because I heard actual voices.
There are some people playing beach volleyball out there, even though we don't have a beach. No, I guess I'm asking, when we're having this conversation, what voices were you hearing, whether from your past, your upbringing, your childhood, your marriage, anything, school?
I don't know. And we're saying voices as a symbol of what we grew up with, right?
Either what you grew up
So
with or where you attended university, or it could be from your marriage, it could be from your in-laws, it could be from any number of things.
yeah, when we're having this conversation, I do think of the voices that I no longer accept into my life. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. About the
Okay.
absence of
Yeah.
certain voices. It's saying I no longer want to have those voices because they're not helpful, they're not healthy. They might have been
Yes.
normalized, but they're not healthy. And I think
Yes.
for the longest time, it was me having a negotiation of, yeah, I grew up around this, and anger seems normal, or this kind of very volatile reaction to something minuscule is normal, but that does not mean it's healthy. And I'm just now in the past year or so starting to understand that you're not supposed to punch someone if they give you cold French fries. That's not or whatever, something like that.
Whoa.
How many times have you punched someone at McDonald's for giving you cold fries?
You
5.
know, I think about my dad because he told me about the time that he was trying to I mean, Los Angeles is crazy trying to drive places, right? I mean, even the parking lot, there's a lot of tension. So I remember the time he got into a fight over a parking spot. And I think to myself, yeah, that's what I grew up with. Let's have that volatile reaction. But hey, I did have rage for a while. You know, I did go straight to angry rather than go through the phases of, oh, I'm mad. Now I'm irritated for a long period of time. Now I'm angry. It was just 0 to 100 for throughout my 20s. And it created the kind of person where I would communicate in an awful ways, just critical, not at all emotionally regulated. If I'm sad, I'm angry. If I'm happy about something, it's not safe. Then I go to angry. So it took quite some time for me to take some of these volatile reactions and then to morph them into something a little bit more comfortable and more like me. And again, a lot of that is I stepped away from that volatility, whether it's volatile relationships or my volatile family on occasion. And I started to surround myself with people who are much more regulated and much more able to discuss feelings and then create a space for me where I can have a discussion and it would feel like I was heard, right? So that is actually what made my old voices, or the voices that were modeled for me, um, things I no longer hear internally. And
Right.
I think I really value that as part of being an adult, and being able to, as children, we have these voices around us. We don't get to choose, but now as an adult, you get to choose who you have around you to
Right.
help create meaning in your life and to create the rules that govern you. And you get to make your own rules, really, and hope to create a space for the next generation where they have the freedom to do that as well.
Right. And I'm going through exactly the same thing, starting to develop new voices, um, starting to understand that the voices from the past aren't necessarily healthy, um, for my well-being. And, when I was younger, I did surround myself with some people that were pretty narcissistic and very self-focused. And obviously with my natural bend, it was to ensure that they were happy and gain their approval. And now I'm surrounding myself with people like you who are extremely healthy, who I always feel very comfortable, not only comfortable, but I always feel much better. It's like there's a weight that's been lifted off me when I speak to you or someone who's a good friend. So yeah, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, the friendships that we have can often mitigate the family tensions that we don't have a choice
Right.
with, right?
Eh,
Because then you have your own stories and how you have had to navigate your family tensions, and then we come together and we're like, "Whoa, we both have the same family tensions. How do we get through it?" And then you don't feel alone. That's the thing about conversations and communication and interactions. If you are in a space where the people around you don't make sense or kind of are make your life uncomfortable, go
Right.
to other people that are going through the very same thing and you will not feel as alone, and you can have a discussion of how do we get through this? Because connection can override. That connection overrides meaning that was created by the dysfunctional people in our lives.
Right. And I think by virtue of just being a human being, we all have very similar experiences. I think we're more similar than not oftentimes. And you and I, we have very similar experiences. I didn't necessarily have anger, but I had anxiety. There was always a fear something bad was going to happen. And then now I'm that's starting to decrease by people knowing someone like you, for instance, and understanding there is control and not having that learned helplessness, that model that you were given as a child. I think that helps a lot.
And then, like, having you in my life as a friend is like the compassion that you have for people. And sometimes that shows me, and also the fact that you're so calm despite, the things that you've gone through. That calmness actually makes me realize that anger doesn't need to be my go-to, right? Even though sometimes for you, you talk about how you would just acquiesce to what other people believe, and that outwardly looks like calmness. But I don't think you're aware that that calmness, that rule that you've created about yourself, that be calm under the situation, also applies in situations that are completely healthy, such as when you are being a friend and supportive.
I guess that's true. I never thought about that. Wow, look at you. You just gave me therapy. Thank you. I owe you 40
Um,
grand.
wow, if I could make 40 grand an hour,
That would be fantastic.
I would love it. So, do you want to do the closing?
What did we learn today? What did we learn today, Dr. D? Well, I think we learned quite a few different things, Bakhtin and CCM. Did I get the acronym correct?
I think you did. You did. No, 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 wait, you didn't. Oh my God.
CMM. I'm not good with
CMM.
acronyms. I got the
It's
one
okay.
last
You're
time I got
close.
incorrect too. Anyways, CMM and the dialogical self, constructing who we are is important, not just for ourselves, but for the relationships that we form with one another. And as a child, we're inevitably going to be given certain rules and certain cultural backgrounds and certain perceptions of ourselves and the context of others. But it's important to question those, because even though they're normalized for us as a child doesn't necessarily mean they're the best fit for us or that they're even healthy at all. So just understanding that and communicating with other people, finding other people like you and I found one another, that's incredibly important for not just good mental health, but physical health and spiritual health and emotional health. Yeah. Anything else to add?
I think you did a great job. I would also maybe add a little bit about divisiveness
Sure.
and that connection with others if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling like you don't belong, or, you're maybe this divisiveness is just overwhelming, you're not alone. And when we connect with other people, we can actually override even something that's co created, such as divisiveness itself. And remember, we are constructing divisiveness together. But if we connect and we think and take a minute to look at that divisiveness and wonder if it's serving us as a collective, just pause and think about that, then I think that would be something that will really benefit all of us.
It's not easy to do. It's difficult to sit down with someone for an hour and say, hey, how are
Yeah.
you feeling? Even though especially when their ideologies are different from your own. But I think those are really the conversations that need to happen.
Yeah, and like you said, we are all more alike than we are different, and we construct that reality with each other. All right. Well, this was a wonderful podcast episode. I hope you join us again next time.
This has been Dr. J.
And this is Dr. D signing off.